Now stand back. I've been waiting all weekend for this. Seldom have I heard a more idiotic, mindless statement from somebody in a position to know better. And I mean, this is so magnificently ignorant, even stupid, that if this woman's ignorance were radioactive, Democrats could build the mother of all nuclear brain bombs and wipe out all intelligence on Earth with one explosion. And the woman we're talking about is Melissa Harris Perry. Apparently she has a weekend show on MSNBC. No surprise there. At last check, MSNBC had about 2,200 centrifuges working 24/7 trying to purify stupid. And they've done really well with Melissa Harris-Perry. Melissa Harris-Perry is also a political professor at Tulane, and if you listen for a bit here, you will pity her poor students. Now, Melissa's meltdown occurred on her show over the past weekend. The topic with her panelist had turned to welfare. It had turned to welfare, and one of the panelists, and poor people, one of the panelists dared to suggest that people move from lower to higher income brackets by taking risks and getting out there and trying. And that really yanked Melissa's chain. She actually started screaming and thrashing about on the air like a beached barracuda. Here is what part of that sounded like to the viewers.
Seriously, what in the world is riskier than being a poor person in America? I live in a neighborhood where people are shot on my street corner. I live in a neighborhood where people have to figure out how to get their kid into school because maybe it'll be a good school and maybe it won't. I am sick of the idea that being wealthy is risky. No, there's a huge safety net that whenever you fail will catch you and catch you and catch you. Being poor is what is risky. We have to create a safety net for poor people, and when we won't because they happen to look different from us, it is the pervasive ugliness.
Oh, they look different from us. In other words, they're black, so y'all don't care. Where do we start? This is like hunting over a baited field. There are so many targets standing completely still out there with stupid expressions on their faces, you hardly know where to shoot first. Woohoo! Gun metaphor. Let's start with the poor. The poor, pitiful, poor. Really, just how risky is it to be poor in America? How risky is that? You lose your job? Excuse me. You're on unemployment. No job? You're on welfare. Can't find something to eat? Food banks and feeding programs all over the place. Just tell me when was the last time you heard of somebody dying from hunger in this country? You have to hide in this country to die from hunger. No roof over your head? Check into a shelter. The fact is, most people who sleep outside make that choice after rejecting a bed in a shelter because they don't want to follow the rules. For every story of some poor, pitiful, poor person who died on a freezing night outdoors, there's a story of a bed in a shelter that was rejected by that person. You get sick, you have Medicaid. Nobody in this country is denied life-saving medical care because they can't afford to pay for it. Nobody. Food stamps, name it. What's it like to be poor in America? Actually, it's not all that horrible. In a general sense, the average poor person in America has a higher standard of living than the average European. Now, let me say that again. You need to understand what I'm saying here. I'll say it till it sinks in. You take the average poor person in America and tell them they're going to have to live like the average European, and they're going to start screaming racism and discrimination and oppression and every other leftist trigger word that they can remember. You tell a poor person in America that they're going to have to lower their standard of living to that of the average European, and the proggies will tell you that you're hating on the poor. Specifics? Yeah, I have specifics. Let me go back to a story and a picture that appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution earlier this year. The story is rewritten. They run this story every single year. It's all about pitiful poor people who have to wait in line to get their dollars for their home heating assistance for the winter. So this past winter, the AJC showed a picture of some poor, pitiful, poor person complaining that she might not get her heating dollars. And right there in her living room, in that picture, you could see her big screen TV, at least a 50-incher, and you could see the PlayStation video game for her kids. She needed taxpayer dollars to pay for her heating so she could afford her big screen TV, probably cable, PlayStations. Oh, there was a space heater in the background. The writer told us that this woman can only afford to heat the room she's occupying. Well, guess what the hell what? That's the way the average European does it. In Europe, they think it's stupid to heat a room you're not using. So they only heat the room they're in. And that's the way your parents or grandparents probably lived in this country. You couldn't tell that from the AJC reporter, though. The purpose of the story was to make your heart bleed for the pitiful poor woman, not to give you any actual facts. That's pretty risky stuff, isn't it, Melissa Harris Perry? You want more statistics on being poor and how risky that is in America? Melissa? The typical poor household has a car. 78% of poor households in America have air conditioning. 64% of poor households have cable or satellite TV. Most have 2 TVs, DVD player, VCR. Most poor households have gaming systems, Xbox, PlayStation. 38% of poor households have a personal computer. Most poor households in America have a refrigerator, an oven, a stove, a washer, clothes dryer, ceiling fans, cordless phone, and a coffee maker. Boy, that's suffering. The typical poor American has more living space than the average European. The typical poor American family is able to obtain medical care when they need it. And the average poor household in America actually says, oh yeah, we have the money we need to meet our essential needs. And you can only assume that this has grown since Obama. But wait, there's more. I've cited on the air studies that show a single mother of 3 earning the minimum wage has more disposable income than a traditional 2-parent household with 2 children making $60,000 a year. That study was done by the Cleveland Current newspaper. They took all of the goodies, earned income tax credit, food stamps, school lunch program, temporary assistance for needed families, Medicaid, CHIP, Section 8 rent subsidies, heating assistance program. And little Miss Minimum Wage, earning $14,500 a year, walked away with $37,777 in disposable income, while the 2-parent family earning $60,000 after taxes and child care brought home about $34,000. Being poor is risky? Really, Melissa? Let me tell you about poor people and risk-taking. Now listen up. Having unprotected sex so that your boyfriend can knock you up and then having a baby you can't afford, that's risky. Ignoring your education and job training opportunities to the point that you can't qualify for a job that makes more than the minimum wage, that's risky. Not even completing high school, that's risky. Not getting a high school diploma increases by 50% your chance of being poor. Getting hooked on drugs, that's risky. Taking money you could use to buy your kids a book and spending it instead on a cool tattoo, that's risky. Getting a job, making a habit not showing up for work on Mondays and Fridays, that's risky. Spending your spare money on lottery tickets or your local Tresses and Talons shop, that's risky. Refusing to move out of a crime-ridden inner-city environment and relocating by whatever means necessary to an area with better schools, less drugs and crime, and some basic job opportunities, that's risky too. And don't give me this I can't afford it crap. Your ancestors did that walking alongside covered wagons, and inside that wagon, their possessions, a few tables and chairs and maybe a bed. They had to dig holes in the ground to go to the bathroom along the way. You have a car. There's rest areas. Load up the car and do it. Move. Embracing the no snitching rule so that police can't do an effective job of ridding your neighborhood of the thugs that shoot your friends on the street corners, Melissa. That's risky. And you say there's no risk-taking in being wealthy? There's a huge safety net that'll catch the wealthy whenever you fail, catch them over and over and over and over again? Really? CNNMoney.com tells us that households have lost a total of $16 trillion in household wealth since the recession. This wasn't wealth held by the poor. This was wealth held by middle and upper income people. $16 trillion. Is the government out there making those people whole again with that safety net you talk about? Is the government restoring lost savings accounts? Lost retirement accounts, depleted IRAs and 401ks? Being rich is risk-free? What about the businessmen who've had to close down their businesses, their life's dreams, as a result of the recession? Where was the government safety net, Melissa, that catches them over and over and over? Tell me one business lost to a small businessman that has been restored by the government. Tell me how the government stepped in and gave that businessman back the cash and time he invested in his business. Tell me about that safety net, Melissa. What about the stock losses and failed corporations? What about the dividends no longer being paid by corporations on the financial brink? Tell me, Melissa, how is the government stepping in to stretch the safety net under those investors? Even the Huffington Post reports that wealth lost during the recession hit the middle and upper income people the hardest. Tell me about the government safety net that made them whole again, Melissa. Do you want to know what the safety net for the rich is? The same safety net your poor, pitiful, poor people have. When the rich finally lose everything, they have SNAP, Section 8, Earned Income Tax Credit, Child Care Tax Credits, food banks, welfare, and the rest of the social programs that prop up your neighbors in that violent neighborhood you can't bring yourself to leave. So don't move, Melissa. You stay right there where you are. The shootings on the street corner, everything. You stay right there where you are and bitch about the rich. That's where you belong. And just thank God your Democrat masters let you work in the House sometimes.